So we're back with the whale videos. Now for Clorinde, should you go for her constellations or her weapon and her weapon refinements? In this video, we're just going to be comparing the two, explaining them and telling you how much damage you're going to gain by getting each one of them. And hopefully I'm going to give you the correct roadmap that you can go for to whale correctly for Clorinde. So yeah, let's begin. Alright, so first we'll start off with her signature weapon, Absolution. It's a 5-star sword. It's going to give you a huge base attack, one of the highest in the game. Well, it is the highest, but it shares that with some other weapons. But yeah, it's going to be the highest base attack in the game. It's also going to give you a crit damage substat, which is pretty good, and then more crit damage from the passive. And then when you increase the value of your bond of life, it's going to give you damage bonus to all of your damage by 16% to a maximum of 3 stacks. That means it's going to give you a 48% damage bonus. So what this weapon gives you in total is going to be a super high base attack, 64% crit damage, and then 48% damage bonus to your whole team. That's it. That's going to be for Clorinde herself. The 48% damage bonus is not going to be accessible for any other character, I think, other than Clorinde. I don't really think any other sword user is going to be able to use that. So I would say this weapon is going to be kind of specific for Clorinde. I wouldn't really say it's a good investment overall for your account. But yeah, either way, we're talking about Clorinde in this video. That's what this weapon is going to give you. With the refinements, basically just the passive is going to double and that's it. Now for the damage gain that you're going to get from this weapon, obviously it's just going to depend on which weapon you had before. But to make it more general, I would say if you have the Harangipiku or the Mist Splitter, getting this weapon is going to result in around like a 10% or even less damage increase from these weapons. It's going to be like 10, 15, maybe a little less or a little more, depending on like the team and stuff like that. Any other weapons, I did a weapons tier list before, so if you want to check it out, you can. But any other weapons from like A tier or B tier, that weapon is going to result in around like a 15 to 20% or maybe 25% damage increase. It heavily depends on the team, which weapon you have, which refinement the weapon is and stuff like that. But in general, this is the range you'd want to expect. You're probably going to have a decent enough weapon for Clorinde, so the damage increase you'd want to expect is going to be around like 15 to 25%. Probably not more or not less than that. And if you have the Harangipiku or the Mist Splitter, it's going to be even a smaller increase. For refinements, you'd want to expect around like a 5% damage increase for each refinements, just like the standard for any 5-star weapon pretty much. You're just going to be getting some extra damage bonus and crit damage, but eventually you're going to hit diminishing returns. So yeah, that's her weapon as a whole. Honestly, it's just like your average signature weapon, to be honest. Especially lately, that's like what's been going on. You know, it's just a quick little like 15-20% damage increase to the character who can use it, and then pretty much none of the other characters can use the weapon. So yeah, same thing with the refinements, around a 5% increase for each refinements. So yeah, that's pretty much her weapon. Now let's move on to her constellations. Now, starting off with her first constellation, her C1, it's just that when you have your elemental skill active, basically, every time you deal electro damage, you're going to be dealing extra hits, around 60% of Clorinde's damage, and those hits are going to be considered normal tax damage too. So it's basically just some extra electro damage. You're probably going to fit in a couple of them each rotation, maybe around like 6 or somewhere around that, and that's going to result in quite a bit of damage actually. It's going to have, as I said, a multiplier of 60% total, which is pretty good. It's also going to get all of like the bonuses you're going to have because it's just considered normal attack damage. So any crit bonuses, normal tax damage bonuses, stuff like that are just going to apply, which is super good. This constellation as a whole is going to result in around like a 25 to 30% damage increase. It also depends on like which team you're playing in, teammates and stuff like that, but that's generally the range you'd want to expect. It's kind of stable to like 25, 30. It's not going to be like a huge difference. In the reactions teams, it might make a little more difference if you're playing in like Overload or Aggravate because it's just going to allow you to do more reactions. But in places like Mono Electro, for example, it's going to have less of an impact. But generally, as I said, you can expect like a 25 to 30% damage increase from her C1. It's just going to be like extra electro damage bonus, which is always pretty good. I would honestly say for a C1, that's a very good constellation. It's a huge damage increase and it's also a simple constellation, just extra electro damage bonus. Or not damage bonus, just like straight up extra electro damage. So yeah, that's not bad at all. Especially for C1, I'd say it's super good. Our C2 is just going to enhance your passive. That passive is just going to give you extra damage bonus based around your attack. Usually it gives you 20% out of your attack up to 3 stacks. Now it gives you 30% of your attack up to 3 stacks. Maximum was 1800. Now it's going to be 2700. Also a very cool damage increase in general. This damage bonus is going to add up, especially for each time you're going to auto attack or do your elemental burst damage. You're going to be getting this damage bonus every time. So yeah, obviously you're going to take take advantage out of that, and it's going to be a super good constellation. Generally, it's going to result in around a 20 to 15% damage increase. It's just damage bonus to your already existing electro attacks. It's not going to increase your C1's damage, by the way. It's just going to increase your normal attacks and burst damage bonus, but that's still going to be pretty good. Yeah, it's going to result in like 15-20% damage increase. In my opinion, that's pretty good, especially for C2. Now, C3 is just going to increase the level of your elemental skill. That's going to increase a lot of things, like how much bond of life you need. You're going to get it quicker. It's going to increase your elemental skills damage, your like Surgeon Blade and stuff like that. Overall, though, it's not going to be a huge increase because it's just increasing like the level and your multipliers. So it's not really going to result in a huge amount of damage. It's going to be around like a 5% damage increase. So yeah, C3, in my opinion, is definitely just a skip. It's just the elemental skill level. If you're going for it and want to stop at like C3 alone, I say just definitely don't. Unless you're going for constellations after it, then we're going to see in a bit. Now, C4 is just going to buff your elemental burst damage. The damage you do when you do your elemental burst is going to be buffed based around how much bond of life you're going to be having at the time. I think usually you're going to be able to take the full advantage. The maximum is going to be 200% if you have 100% or above bond of life. I think mostly you're going to be able to achieve that, but either way, it's not going to be like a huge damage difference. It's going to make your burst more of a nuke, but the thing is your burst is not even like a huge part of your damage anyways. So buffing this damage is not really going to matter as much. So yeah, usually it's just going to result in around a 5% damage increase too, maybe a little more depending on the team, but usually that's going to be the damage increase you'd expect from this constellation. So yeah, in my opinion, I'd say C4 skip. It's going to buff your burst by a lot, but the thing is your burst is not even like a huge part of your damage anyways. So overall, it's not going to result in like a huge amount of damage increase for Clorinde. C5 is also just going to increase the level of your elemental burst, which means it's just going to increase the multiplier. Also not as good. Your elemental burst is not going to, be a huge part of your damage anyways, as I said before. And that's even going to increase its damage less than C4 because it's just going to be increasing the multiplier. It's going to increase the bond of life too, but it's kind of whatever. So yeah, it's going to result in around like less than 5% damage increase, maybe around that too. But yeah, it's also definitely a skip in my opinion. And then finally, you have C6. It's that when you enter the state in your elemental skill, it's going to increase your crit rate by 10% and your crit damage by 70%, which is super good. It's a huge crit increase. You're going to be getting both crit rate and crit damage. Crit rate a little less, but it's still going to be super good. So yeah. And then also it's going to give you 6 nukes during your elemental skill use per rotation. They're going to happen when you get attacked or when you unleash your Impale the Knight. So you're usually going to be able to take full advantage out of them, 6 for every rotation. Each one of them is going to be kind of a nuke. It's going to have a 200% attack multiplier, which is huge. Oh yeah, and also C6 is going to reduce the damage you take by 80%. So you're practically taking more damage, and most importantly, it's going to increase your resistance to interruption. That's going to be super good. If you're playing her with a shielder and stuff like that, you're not going to need that anymore because she practically has a shield. She's going to be taking like 80% less damage, and you're not going to be knocked back because you're going to have your resistance to interruption increased. Especially in like an overloaded team and stuff like that, that's going to make a huge difference. So yeah, C6 is just going to give you a lot of things like just extra damage, nukes of damage, and then it's going to give you crit, resistance to interruption, then also, sustain. So yeah, it's just a super good constellation from either way. The damage increase is going to result in around like a 35% damage increase. That's super good, obviously, but as I said before, it gives you more than that. It's also going to give you sustain. That's going to allow you to play like other supports on your team and stuff like that. And also resistance to interruption, which can make sure you do your rotations properly, and maybe that's going to result in more damage overall. But yeah, on paper, it's going to result in like a 35% damage increase. So yeah, it's a very good C6. If you're going for it, I say it's definitely worth it. Alright, so now moving on to the final conclusion. How should you wish? Before continuing that though, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, do all of these things. Do you do it? Okay, thank you. Now back to the video. So yeah, in what order should you wish? In my opinion, I'd say C1 and her weapon are kind of equal in terms of like how much damage you're gonna gain in general. Obviously, it depends on which weapon you have before, but if you don't have like the Harengepiku or the Mist-Splitter, in that case, C1 and her R1 are gonna be kind of equal. If you have the Harengepiku or the Mist-Splitter, then C1 obviously wins. But if you don't and you're coming from like a bad weapon, or not a bad weapon, just like not a super premium weapon for her, in that case, again, C1 or R1 is going to be kind of equal. C1 is going to be a little better maybe, but when you get R1, it's going to be a weapon in your arsenal. So that's always pretty good. Maybe not many characters can use it, but at the end of the day, it's still a 5-star weapon. It has crit damage, high base attack, so you can always use it as like a stat stick for many other characters. So if you're like tight on primo gems, this might be a better investment because overall, they're going to be kind of equal. But again, I repeat, if you have the Harden Gippaku or the Mistsplitter, then R1 is just not going to be worth it at all. So yeah, for C1 or R1, I'd say you decide, honestly. It's just up to you and what weapons you already have. Next after that, between her weapon and C2, if you went for C1, in that case, you probably just want to get her weapon. I think her weapon is going to be better than C2. And again, a better investment for your account overall. So yeah, I'd say between her C2 and her weapon, if you already went for C1, I say go for her weapon and then go for C2. C2 R1 is definitely going to be a very good stopping point because the value of the constellation is just going to drop. Pretty much C3, C4, and C5 are all going to be sort of useless. So unless you're going for C6, I'd say just stop at C2 R1. It's definitely not worth it to go up there. But if you want to invest in her more, then C6 is definitely not a bad C6. It's one of the good C6s, just going to transform her, make her much more comfortable to build and to play. And it's going to give you a ton of extra damage, so it's a good C6 too. So yeah, in conclusion, you'd want to go either R1 or C1 first. Depends on what you already have. Those are going to be like equal value, and then C2 and probably just stop there or go straight for C6. And then after that, you'd want to get her weapon refinements if you have primo gems to spare. But yeah, that was the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.